see him.
What?
Don't fight. Get on the ground, on your stomach.
Okay. Please. I am.
Face down, hands behind your back. Do it now.
I didn't do anything, man. I'm scared.
Stop moving.
The shaky, grainy image from a body cam lens fills the screen. A voice, distorted by adrenaline and the small microphone, screams in order. Get out of the vehicle, now. Hands where I can see them. Through this chaotic perspective, we see a man in his 50s, impeccably dressed in designer casual wear, emerge from a classic 1968 Ford Mustang. He is a black man, and his expression shows no fear, no panic, only a glacial, analytical calm that seems to absorb the officer's frantic energy without reflecting it. He speaks, his voice measured and clear, a stark contrast to the shouting. "Officer," he says, "you have yet to inform me of the legal reason for this order." The officer, a young white man whose face is unseen but whose aggression is palpable, closes the distance. "I am the legal reason," he snarls. "Now turn around and put your hands on the car." The camera view jolts violently as he grabs the man's arm, and the image freezes. This footage, captured by the body cam of Officer Kyle Jennings, a man with a mere 6 months on the force, documents the 12 minutes that culminated in his summary termination, a criminal conviction, and the largest police misconduct settlement in the city's history. The man he is assaulting is not a criminal suspect. He is Police Chief Arthur Hayes, the commanding officer of the entire department, the man who signs Jennings's paychecks. Officer Jennings's catastrophic error in judgment, an action the subsequent investigation would prove was rooted in explicit racial bias, would ultimately cost the city's taxpayers exactly $30 million. But this chain of events, this irreversible moment of career and personal self-destruction, did not begin with the siren. It began hours earlier, in the quiet, sunlit stillness of a suburban garage, with the smell of wax and the satisfying click of a perfectly calibrated tool. Arthur Hayes believed in order, in precision, in the idea that complex systems, whether they were police departments or vintage V8 engines, functioned best when every component was respected and maintained. His garage was a testament to this philosophy. Every wrench, every socket, was cleaned and returned to its designated place on the pegboard outline. The concrete floor was swept clean of all but the most stubborn oil stains. For the past 5 years, his sanctuary had been the chassis of the 1968 Ford Mustang, a car he had purchased as a rusted-out shell and meticulously restored bolt by bolt. It was more than a hobby, it was a form of meditation. The work required a patience and foresight that he applied to his professional life, understanding that a small, overlooked flaw could lead to catastrophic failure down the road. That afternoon, the work was finished. The Highland green paint gleamed under the fluorescent lights, a mirror reflecting a man who saw not just a car, but a piece of himself, a physical manifestation of his dedication. He ran a soft cloth over the chrome fender, his movements economical and sure. He was off-duty, wearing a simple but well-fitting polo shirt and slacks, a man at peace in his own domain. The plan was simple: take the car for its first long drive to visit an old friend, a retired detective who lived across town in the manicured, oak-lined enclave of Northwood Hills. He closed the garage door, the engine turning over with a low, contented rumble. It was 5:15 p.m. The late afternoon sun was warm on the asphalt as he pulled onto the street, the world feeling, for a moment, perfectly in balance. 20 miles away, Officer Kyle Jennings was feeling the opposite of balance. He was agitated, bored, and simmering with a low-grade resentment that was becoming his default state. Patrolling the quiet, wealthy streets of Northwood Hills felt less like policing and more like being a private security guard for people who looked at him with a mixture of condescension and annoyance. He had joined the force with visions of high-stakes arrests and heroic interventions, but the reality was a monotonous loop of minor traffic violations and false alarms from oversensitive home security systems. He saw himself as a protector, a guardian at the gate, but the people behind the gates didn't seem to want or need his protection. His 6 months of experience had been just long enough to cement his biases, but not long enough to grant him any wisdom. To him, procedure was a suggestion, and his gut feeling was evidence. At 5:42 p.m., his gut feeling flared. He saw the Mustang first, its classic lines and deep green color an anomaly among the endless parade of silver sedans and white SUVs. Then he saw the driver. A black man. In this car. In this neighborhood. In Jennings's mind, the three variables did not compute. They created a dissonance, an alert that his internal, unwritten code told him was a threat. There was no crime, no erratic driving, no broken taillight.
There was only a man who, in Jennings's worldview, did not belong. He followed the Mustang for 3 blocks, his patrol car a silent predator. He was looking for an excuse, any minor infraction that would give him the legal cover he needed to act on his prejudice. Then he saw it, a turn, made flawlessly, but perhaps, he told himself, the signal hadn't been activated a full 100 feet in advance. It was enough. He reached for the switch at his console, the decision made not on a point of law, but on a feeling of deep-seated suspicion.
He flicked on the patrol car's rooftop lights, a simple action that bathed the classic car in strobing red and blue, igniting a firestorm from which there would be no going back. The deep green Mustang glided to a stop along the curb, its engine a low, healthy purr. In his rearview mirror, Arthur Hayes watched the patrol car halt behind him, its rooftop lights painting the serene, tree-lined street in frantic strokes of red and blue. He took a slow, deliberate breath, a practice he had honed over 3 decades of policing, and placed his hands on the steering wheel at the 10 and 2 position. He watched the officer, Kyle Jennings, approach in the side mirror. The man's walk was a swagger, a performance of authority he had not yet earned. His hand was resting on the butt of his holstered Glock, a posture meant to intimidate. The tap on the window was harder than necessary. Hayes lowered the window smoothly. The evening air, cool and smelling of freshly cut grass, filled the car. Jennings leaned down, his face a mask of aggressive suspicion, his eyes scanning the immaculate interior of the car before settling on Hayes. He deliberately ignored Hayes's face, instead looking past him at the passenger seat, the back seat, as if expecting to find contraband in plain sight. This, Hayes knew, was procedural theater designed to unnerve. The first words out of the young officer's mouth were not a greeting or a statement of the traffic violation, but an accusation disguised as a question. "Whose car is this?" The tone was laced with disbelief. Hayes met the officer's gaze without animosity. "It's mine, officer." He gestured with his chin toward the glove compartment. "My license and registration are in there. May I retrieve them?" Jennings gave a curt nod, his eyes narrowing. The entire interaction was being recorded by the dashcam of Unit 34, a silent, impartial witness. The footage would later show that Hayes's movements were slow and deliberate. He retrieved the documents and passed them through the open window. Jennings took them without looking, his focus still locked on Hayes. "What are you doing in Northwood Hills?" The question was a territorial challenge. "Visiting a friend," Hayes replied, his voice even. Jennings glanced at the license, his lip curling slightly as he read the name, Arthur Hayes, and an address from a less affluent part of the city. This detail, in his mind, was another piece of evidence confirming his baseless suspicion. The man, the car, the neighborhood, it was a combination that his prejudice could not process as legitimate. He was operating on a script he had written in his own head, and every calm, factual answer from Hayes was a deviation that only increased his frustration. He was looking for a criminal, and he was enraged that the man in front of him refused to play the part. The dashcam audio records 7 seconds of silence as Jennings stared at the documents, his mind racing not with procedure but with pretext. The turn signal violation was flimsy. He needed more. He needed a reason to get this man out of the car, to impose his physical authority and shatter the unnerving composure that felt like a personal insult. He handed the license back. "I'm going to need you to step out of the vehicle, sir." His voice was flat, an order delivered with the expectation of immediate obedience. Hayes did not move. He tilted his head slightly, his expression unchanged. "For what reason, officer?" "According to departmental policy and state law, you need reasonable suspicion that I have committed a crime or pose a threat to your safety to order me out of my vehicle. Can you articulate that suspicion for me?" He was not being defiant. He was being a teacher, offering a final verbal warning, a chance for the young officer to pull back from the brink. It was a test, and Jennings failed it spectacularly. The calm recitation of law was to him the ultimate confirmation. Only a career criminal, a so-called sovereign citizen, or someone with something to hide would know the procedure so well. His training, what little of it had been absorbed, was completely eclipsed by a surge of pure adrenaline and ego. The body cam footage captured the sudden, dark shift in his eyes. "I am the reason," he snarled, abandoning all pretense of professionalism. "I'm giving you a lawful order. Get out of the car, now." Hayes knew this was the point of no return. He had given the officer a clear path away from this disastrous course of action, and he had refused to take it. The moment Hayes's hand moved toward the door latch to comply, Jennings misinterpreted it. He lunged forward, yanking the car door open with such force that the metal groaned in protest. The officer's face was inches from his, contorted with a rage that had no rational source. He reached in, grabbing Hayes's arm in a punishing grip, his knuckles digging into the older man's bicep. This was it. the physical assault, an error in judgment so catastrophic, so thoroughly documented by 3 separate cameras that it would cost him everything. What would you have done in the chief's position? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below and subscribe for more true stories of documented justice. The situation deteriorates with textbook rapidity, a chain reaction of ego and prejudice. The dashcam audio records 7 seconds of silence as Jennings stares at the documents, his mind racing not with procedure but with pretext.
The turn signal violation was flimsy. He needed more. He needed a reason to get this man out of the car, to impose his physical authority and shatter the unnerving composure that felt like a personal insult. He handed the license back. "I'm going to need you to step out of the vehicle, sir." His voice was flat, an order delivered with the expectation of immediate obedience. Hayes did not move. He tilted his head slightly, his expression unchanged. "For what reason, officer?" "According to departmental policy and state law, you need reasonable suspicion that I've committed a crime or pose a threat to your safety to order me out of my vehicle. Can you articulate that suspicion for me?" He was not being defiant. He was being a teacher, offering a final, verbal warning, a chance for the young officer to pull back from the brink. It was a test, and Jennings failed it spectacularly. The calm recitation of law was to him the ultimate confirmation. Only a career criminal would know the procedure so well. His training was completely eclipsed by a surge of pure adrenaline and ego. The body cam footage captured the sudden, dark shift in his eyes. "I am the reason," he snarled, abandoning all pretense of professionalism. "Get out of the car, now." The moment Hayes' hand moved toward the door latch to comply, Jennings lunged forward, yanking the car door open with such force that the metal groaned in protest. What Jennings failed to notice, in his tunnel vision of rage, was the small, dark dome of a security camera mounted on the eaves of the house at 112 Oak Street. It was recording in high-definition color, its wide-angle lens capturing the entire scene without the frantic jolts of the body cam, providing an impartial, damning record of the unprovoked aggression. He reached in, grabbing Hayes' arm in a punishing grip and hauling him out, shoving him hard against the Mustang's gleaming fender. It was at this moment, as Jennings fumbled for his handcuffs, that the turning point arrived. "My name is Arthur Hayes," the man said, his voice firm and unchanged despite the arm being twisted behind his back. "Chief of Police for this department. My badge number is 774. I suggest you get your shift supervisor to this scene immediately, per use of force protocol." The body cam audio recorded nothing but the sound of Jennings' own ragged breathing. His hand trembled as he reached for his radio to call for the supervisor Chief Hayes had just demanded. That transmission would not be a call for backup. It would be a summons for his own executioner. The cold steel of the handcuffs felt heavy and real in Officer Kyle Jennings' hand, a tangible symbol of his victory. He had him, pinned against the gleaming fender of the impossibly perfect car. The man who dared to question his authority was about to be put in his place. A surge of adrenaline, pure and triumphant, coursed through him. This was policing. This was the assertion of order he had craved. He twisted the man's arm higher, relishing the slight groan of fabric and the solid resistance of muscle. He was in complete control, the master of this quiet, sun-drenched street. The high-definition lens of the security camera at 112 Oak Street silently documented every micro-expression of smug satisfaction that crossed Jennings' face. It was in this precise moment of peak arrogance, as he prepared to click the first cuff around the man's wrist, that the world tilted on its axis. The voice that spoke was not strained with pain or laced with fear. It was as level and unyielding as a surveyor's laser, cutting through the haze of Jennings' ego. "My name is Arthur Hayes," the man said, his cheek pressed against the polished paint of his own car. "Chief of Police for this department. My badge number is 774. The words did not register at first. They were just sounds, a nonsensical string of syllables that his brain refused to assemble into a coherent thought. Chief of Police? It was a joke, a desperate, pathetic lie from a cornered criminal trying to talk his way out of a guaranteed arrest. Jennings almost laughed, a sneer already forming on his lips. He tightened his grip, ready to tell the man to shut up. But then came the final sentence, delivered with the chilling finality of a judge's gavel. "I suggest you get your shift supervisor to this scene immediately, per use of force protocol." The phrase use of force protocol was a key turning a lock deep inside his training. It was departmental language, precise and procedural. A civilian wouldn't know that. A common criminal wouldn't cite it with such flawless, calm authority. For the first time, Jennings hesitated. His eyes, which had been locked on the man's back, flickered up, trying to catch his reflection in the car's side mirror. He saw only himself, a young officer whose face was suddenly pale, his expression of dominance curdling into bewilderment. The body cam footage would later show his knuckles, white from the pressure of his grip, slowly losing their color. The triumphant smirk had vanished,
replaced by a slack-jawed vacancy. His mind was a frantic scramble of denial. It was impossible. The chief was a name on a memo, a face in a department-wide email, a figure who existed in the abstract realm of headquarters and press conferences. He wasn't supposed to be here, in casual clothes, driving a classic car in Northwood Hills. The dissonance was too great to compute.
His entire reality, the carefully constructed narrative in which he was the hero and this man was the villain, was shattering like glass. The pressure on Arthur Hayes' arm lessened, not by a conscious decision, but by the sudden failure of Jennings's nerves. His hand began to tremble, a subtle tremor that quickly grew into a visible shake. The weight of the handcuffs in his other hand now felt less like a tool of power and more like an anchor, pulling him down into a professional abyss from which there would be no escape. He could feel the chief's calm, steady breathing against his own ragged, shallow gasps. The power dynamic had not just shifted, it had been inverted with the force of a tidal wave, leaving him stranded and exposed. He reached for his radio, his fingers fumbling with the clip on his vest, a simple action now feeling as complex as defusing a bomb. He knew that activating that microphone would be an act of irreversible self-destruction, a broadcast of his own career's obituary. Was justice served at this moment? Like the video, if you believe accountability is essential. The transmission from Officer Jennings's radio, a clipped and panicked request for a supervisor, hangs in the air for a moment before being answered with a terse affirmative. The official record shows that precisely 2 minutes and 48 seconds elapsed before the wail of approaching sirens sliced through the evening quiet of Northwood Hills. 2 additional patrol cars, Units 21 and 18, arrived on the scene, their tires barely whispering to a halt. The footage from Unit 21's dashcam provides the clearest view of what happened next. Sergeant David Chen, a 20-year veteran with a reputation for being unflappable, steps out of the driver's side. His movements are initially routine, a practiced economy of motion born from supervising hundreds of similar traffic stops. He scans the scene, the classic Mustang, the patrol car parked behind it, and his young officer, Jennings, who stands rigid and pale, his hand still resting on the arm of the man pressed against the car. Chen's expression is neutral, his mind likely running through a checklist of potential scenarios. Then, his eyes lock onto the man's face. The dashcam, recording at 30 frames per second, captures the exact moment of recognition. Chen's stride falters, his procedural mask dissolves, replaced by a wave of sheer, unadulterated horror. His mouth falls slightly open, his eyes widening in disbelief. He takes another step, faster this time, his focus entirely on the man Jennings is detaining. The ambient audio from the dashcam picks up his breathless exclamation, a sound that cuts through the low thrum of the idling engines. "Chief." The word is a choked whisper of reverence and shock. "For God's sake." The second officer, a younger man named Smith, whose own body cam is now recording, has just exited his vehicle and freezes mid-stride, his confusion palpable as he watches his sergeant's reaction. Chan ignores him completely. He ignores Jennings. His entire being is focused on the man his subordinate is physically assaulting. The full force of his voice, a command honed by 2 decades on the streets, erupts. "Jennings, let him go. Let him go now." The order is not a suggestion. It is a primal scream of damage control, a desperate attempt to stop a professional nuclear bomb that has already detonated. For Jennings, the sound of his sergeant's voice confirming his worst fear is the final, definitive blow. The last fragile thread of his denial snaps, and the full, crushing weight of his catastrophic error in judgment descends upon him. His grip on Chief Hayes' arm slackens, his hand falling away as if the chief's sleeve had suddenly become white-hot. Sergeant Chen moves with a speed that belies his years, closing the distance in 3 long strides. His first action is to physically place himself between Jennings and the chief, creating a human barrier. His body language is a clear and public declaration. The threat on this street is not the man in the polo shirt, but the officer in the uniform. He gives Jennings a single withering look of contempt before turning his back on him completely, a gesture of ultimate dismissal. He addresses the chief with a level of deference that borders on apology. "Chief Hayes, sir, are you all right?" Hayes, whose expression has remained utterly impassive throughout the entire ordeal, gives a slow, deliberate nod. He does not speak. He simply pushes himself off the fender of his Mustang and methodically adjusts the sleeve of his shirt, a small, quiet act of reclaiming his dignity that speaks volumes more than any angry outburst ever could. The high-definition security camera from 112 Oak Street captures the scene in a wide, damning tableau. The composed chief, the horrified sergeant, and the utterly broken Officer Jennings,
who now stands isolated, a pariah in his own uniform. The justice that follows is swift, procedural, and brutal. Sergeant Chen, his voice now a low, cold monotone of official business, turns his attention back to Jennings. Officer Jennings, surrender your service weapon, now. The body cam of Officer Smith, who has remained a silent, stunned observer, records the humiliation in excruciating detail. Jennings's hands tremble uncontrollably as he unclips the retention strap on his holster. The sound of the plastic click seems impossibly loud in the sudden silence.
He hands the Glock, grip first, to his sergeant, an act of total emasculation. The stripping of his authority continues, piece by methodical piece. Your duty dealt, your radio, your taser. Each command is followed by Jennings's clumsy, fumbling compliance. Finally, he stands before them, divested of every tool and symbol of his power. The final indignity is delivered with chilling professionalism. Turn around. Place your hands behind your back. Sergeant Chen does not handcuff him. Instead, he gestures to Officer Smith, who steps forward to perform the task, his face a mask of grim duty. The metallic ratchet of the cuffs locking around Jennings's wrists is the sound of his career ending. He is then escorted to the back of his own patrol car, the cage he had intended for Chief Hayes, now his own holding cell. Sergeant Chen closes the door, a final, definitive act. The formal investigation had not even begun, but the verdict, recorded in crystal-clear high definition from 3 separate angles, was already in. The fallout for Kyle Jennings was not a slow decline. It was a professional and personal freefall from a great height, with the hard, unforgiving ground of reality rushing up to meet him. The justice was not poetic, it was procedural, a cold, bureaucratic engine of consequence that once started could not be stopped. Before Sergeant Chen had even finished filing his initial use of force report, Jennings was placed on administrative leave. The internal affairs investigation, often a lengthy, drawn-out process, was concluded in a record 48 hours. The evidence was so overwhelming, so irrefutable, captured from 3 different angles in crystal-clear high definition, that it left no room for interpretation, defense, or departmental protection. There was no thin blue line to shield him from the consequences of his own prejudice. The termination letter, delivered by courier to his home, was a masterpiece of legal finality. It cited a litany of violations, from Section 4 of the department's use of force policy to gross insubordination and conduct unbecoming of an officer. His career, which had lasted just over 6 months, was officially over. But this was only the first domino to fall. The state's Peace Officer Standards and Training Board, acting on the department's report, permanently revoked his certification. This was not a suspension, it was a professional execution. He was now legally barred from working as a law enforcement officer in any capacity, in any state, for the rest of his life. His name was added to the National Decertification Index, a permanent digital tombstone for a career that had barely begun. The criminal charges followed with breathtaking speed. The district attorney's office, under immense public pressure and armed with an airtight case, indicted him on federal charges of aggravated assault under color of law and violation of civil rights. He was no longer Officer Jennings, he was Defendant Jennings, his uniform replaced by a cheap suit he could barely afford. He was convicted on all counts, the jury taking less than an hour to deliberate. The judge, in his sentencing, called Jennings's actions a profound betrayal of the public trust. The sentence was 5 years in a federal penitentiary, a place where his former profession made him an immediate and vulnerable target. His ruin was then meticulously quantified in the civil arena, where the true cost of his prejudice was calculated down to the last dollar. Chief Arthur Hayes, acting not out of vengeance but a profound sense of duty, filed a civil rights lawsuit against the city. Faced with the undeniable video evidence, the city's attorneys did not even attempt to mount a defense, opting for a swift settlement to avoid a protracted and embarrassing public trial. The final figure was a staggering $30 million, the largest police misconduct settlement in the city's history. This was not just a number, it was a detailed invoice for a single act of bigotry. Kyle Jennings personally lost his annual salary of $68,500. His pension contributions were liquidated to cover a fraction of his mounting legal fees, which ultimately exceeded $150,000, plunging his family into a chasm of debt. The $30 million settlement paid by the taxpayers he had sworn to protect was broken down with surgical precision. $12 million was awarded to Chief Hayes for damages. In an act that solidified his legacy, Hayes immediately placed the entire sum into a charitable trust, creating the 774B Scholarship Fund, an endowment dedicated to financing criminal justice education for underprivileged minority students. The remaining $18 million was mandated by the federal consent decree that accompanied the settlement. This money was earmarked for a complete overhaul of the department's training and oversight.
It funded the purchase of new dash cams and body cams for every officer, a complete rewrite of the department's traffic stop protocols, and the creation of the Hayes-Chen Implicit Bias Program, a mandatory continuous training regimen that used the footage of Jennings's own traffic stop as its primary case study. His worst moment was now a permanent part of the training curriculum, his failure a lesson for every future recruit.
While Kyle Jennings sat in a federal prison cell, his name a byword for disgrace, Chief Arthur Hayes continued to lead his department, his quiet competence and unwavering integrity not just intact, but amplified. He had faced down an act of blatant racism, not with rage, but with the calm authority of the law itself, and in doing so, had forced a moment of profound and expensive accountability. Was justice truly served? Did the 5 years in prison or the permanent loss of a career finally teach Kyle Jennings that a uniform is not a license for prejudice? Perhaps the real lesson is found on the city's balance sheet, a $30 million reminder that bigotry has a price, and in the end, the check always comes due.